Part 1, the television courtroom, had never witnessed such a moment of pure, unfiltered arrogance meeting its absolute destruction. Vanessa Carter, a 380-lub woman in her early 50s who had spent 6 years terrorizing small business owners with fraudulent lawsuits, sat in the defendant's chair with the kind of smug superiority that could only come from someone who had never faced real consequences for anything in her entire criminal career. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at Judge Judith Sterling as the words that would cost her $75,000 and 8 years of her freedom spilled from her lips with breathtaking audacity. "Maybe you should calm your hormones, Judge. This is clearly a case of menopausal overreaction to a simple business matter. You're being emotional and irrational, which is typical for women your age who can't handle stress anymore." The silence that followed felt absolutely nuclear. Every single person in that courtroom felt the atmosphere shift from professional legal proceedings to something far more dangerous and deeply personal, something that would soon be replayed 180 million times across every social media platform imaginable and turn Vanessa Carter into the most hated woman in America overnight. But here's what made the story even more unbelievable. Vanessa didn't just lose her case. She didn't just get humiliated on national television in front of millions of viewers watching from their living rooms. What Judge Judith Sterling did to her in the next 30 seconds was so devastatingly brutal, so righteously furious, and so legally precise that it triggered federal criminal investigations across 4 states, exposed a fraud operation that had collected over $400,000 from vulnerable immigrant business owners, and became the most satisfying courtroom destruction in television history. We're talking about a professional scammer who had successfully run her con on 31 previous victims. A woman who had refined her playbook over 47 lawsuits and believed she had mastered the legal system. She thought Judge Judith Sterling would be just another pushover authority figure she could manipulate with accusations of discrimination and threats of bad publicity. Vanessa had absolutely no idea that Judge Judith Sterling had spent an entire week coordinating with federal investigators, contacting her previous victims, and building a case so airtight that it would send Vanessa to prison for 8 years and cost her absolutely everything she had stolen through fraud and deception. Before we reveal the exact moment when this entitled fraud artist told America's most respected television judge to calm her hormones and instantly triggered the most thorough takedown in courtroom history, make sure you hit that like button right now. If you believe people who weaponize discrimination laws to commit fraud against hard-working immigrants deserve to be exposed and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, subscribe so you never miss these explosive courtroom moments where calculated predators who think they've mastered the system finally meet someone who actually did the homework and refuses to tolerate manipulation tactics. Trust me, what you're about to witness in the next 25 minutes will restore your faith that justice still exists, that karma is terrifyingly real and has perfect timing, and that Judge Judith Sterling is still the undisputed queen of destroying people who think their carefully rehearsed victimhood performance can substitute for actual evidence and basic human decency. Vanessa Carter had walked into Judge Judith Sterling's courtroom on a cold Tuesday morning, believing this would be her 32nd successful payday from a small business owner too frightened or too financially weak to fight back against her accusations of weight discrimination. She had filed 47 lawsuits over 6 years using the exact same manipulative playbook every single time. Target small businesses owned by immigrants who couldn't afford extended legal battles. Make impossible demands about accommodations that would cost thousands of dollars. Record the inevitable refusal with hidden cameras. File a lawsuit claiming discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Watch the business owner panic as negative reviews flooded their social media and local news stations picked up the story. Then offer to settle for $8,000 to $15,000, an amount carefully calculated to be just slightly less than what it would cost the business to defend themselves in court. 31 businesses had paid her to make the nightmare disappear. She had collected $412,000 over 6 years and reported exactly $0 as income on her tax returns, falsely claiming the money was tax-free medical settlements. Vanessa was making approximately $67,000 per year running this fraud operation, and she had gotten away with it because each individual victim existed in isolation, completely unaware that they were part of a much larger criminal pattern. What Vanessa didn't know as she rolled into that courtroom on her mobility scooter, a prop she used despite 3 independent doctors confirming she had no physical limitations requiring assistance, was that her latest victim had refused to become another statistic. Sophia Kim, a 39-year-old Korean immigrant who had spent 15 exhausting years working as a nail technician, while saving every possible dollar to open her own luxury wellness spa, had done something none of Vanessa's previous 31 victims had thought to do. She researched Vanessa's name and discovered the terrifying pattern of lawsuits stretching back 6 years. She contacted other business owners who had been targeted and financially destroyed by the same woman. She hired a private investigator who documented Vanessa walking normally, carrying heavy grocery bags, and living a completely mobile life whenever she wasn't pretending to be disabled for lawsuits. And most importantly, Sophia had reached out to a legal advocacy group that specialized in helping small businesses fight back against fraudulent litigation. Somehow, through persistence and sheer desperation, her case had ended up on Judge Judy Sterling's desk, with a handwritten note attached that read, "This woman has destroyed 15 immigrant families and needs to be stopped." Judge Judy Sterling had done something she rarely did anymore. She had taken the case personally and spent an entire week investigating Vanessa Carter with the thoroughness of a federal prosecutor building a RICO case. She instructed her research team to pull every lawsuit Vanessa had ever filed. She personally called 5 of Vanessa's previous victims and listened to heartbreaking stories of businesses closed, savings depleted, and reputations ruined forever. She coordinated with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and provided evidence of tax evasion. She worked with the FBI to document what amounted to a wire fraud operation spanning multiple states. By the time court day arrived, Judge Judy Sterling had everything she needed, not just to rule against Vanessa, but to expose her fraud to millions of viewers and ensure she would face criminal prosecution severe enough to send her to federal prison and strip away every dollar she had stolen from hardworking people chasing the American dream. Vanessa Carter wasn't born a monster, but she had certainly perfected the art of becoming once over 6 ruthless years of systematic fraud and exploitation. At 52 years old and 380 pounds, she had discovered something most criminals never fully understand. She learned that in modern America, accusations of discrimination could be weaponized into a profitable business model if you were willing to abandon every shred of conscience and target the most vulnerable people in society. Her background made her transformation into a professional predator even more disturbing. Vanessa had attended law school for exactly 1 year before dropping out due to what she publicly called philosophical differences with her professors, though her academic records showed she was actually failing most of her classes and had been cited twice for plagiarism. She later worked as a paralegal for 8 years at a small law firm in New Jersey, where she learned the mechanics of civil litigation and discovered exactly how much it cost small businesses to defend themselves against lawsuits. She was fired in 2016 after 6 formal complaints from coworkers accusing her of creating a hostile work environment, making inappropriate comments, and attempting to steal client files. That was the moment Vanessa decided that if the legal system wouldn't allow her to succeed within it, she would exploit it from the outside instead. Her first lawsuit had almost been accidental. She genuinely tried to join a gym in 2017, and the owner explained that their equipment had weight ratings that couldn't safely accommodate her. Instead of accepting it as a legitimate safety concern, Vanessa saw opportunity. She researched disability discrimination law, filed complaints with the state attorney general, posted negative reviews online, and then approached the terrified gym owner with an offer to make the entire situation disappear for $10,000. The owner paid within 2 weeks. Vanessa had just made more money in 1 month than she previously earned in 3 months as a paralegal, and she had done it with terrifyingly little effort. She was instantly hooked. Part 2. Over the next 6 years, Vanessa Carter refined her operation into a precise science that would have impressed organized crime syndicates. She created detailed spreadsheets tracking small businesses in her area and across multiple state lines. She carefully noted which businesses were owned by immigrants who might be more afraid to fight back. She researched which industries were most vulnerable to discrimination claims and learned how to identify businesses that didn't have legal counsel on retainer and operated on dangerously thin profit margins. Vanessa developed a network of 3 accomplices who acted as witnesses to her alleged discrimination, testifying that they saw business owners treat her poorly in exchange for $500 per case. She found 2 corrupt doctors willing to sign medical documents claiming she had suffered emotional trauma and anxiety attacks from discrimination incidents, charging her $1 housing per fraudulent medical report. But Vanessa's operation was even more sophisticated and deeply disturbing than simple extortion. She had actually created an online business teaching other people how to commit the same fraud. Vanessa ran a secret Facebook group with over 200 members, where she openly shared tactics and strategies. She sold a downloadable guide for $299 titled How to Turn Your Body into a 6-Figure Business, which was essentially a manual for committing systematic fraud against small business owners. She hosted monthly webinars with titles like Identifying Vulnerable Targets and Maximizing Settlement Values, where she coached aspiring scammers on which businesses to target and exactly how much money to demand in settlements. She was making an additional $15,000 to $20 per year from this coaching operation on top of the $67,000 she averaged annually from her own fraudulent lawsuits. Vanessa had built a criminal enterprise sophisticated enough to attract the attention of the FBI's Organized Crime Division, and she had operated in plain sight for 6 years because law enforcement rarely gets involved in civil discrimination disputes until someone connects the dots and proves a pattern of fraud. The truly sinister genius of Vanessa's scheme was her understanding of exactly how much financial and emotional pressure small business owners could withstand before they completely broke. She knew the average cost to defend against a discrimination lawsuit was at least $30,000, and that most small businesses operated on profit margins so razor-thin that spending $30, zeros on legal fees, would destroy them financially, even if they ultimately won the case. She knew immigrant business owners often had limited English skills and were terrified of the legal system and anything that could threaten their immigration status or their businesses. She knew negative publicity from discrimination accusations could permanently damage a company's reputation, regardless of whether the accusations were true. Vanessa knew threatening to file complaints with state agencies and contacting local media outlets would amplify the pressure and make her victims desperate for the nightmare to end. She had carefully calculated that demanding settlements between $8,000 and $15 zeroes in hit the perfect sweet spot where business owners would pay simply to make her disappear because fighting would cost twice as much, even if they won. What made Vanessa truly dangerous, beyond her systematic exploitation, was her complete lack of empathy or remorse for the destruction she caused. She kept detailed files on every business she targeted, and those files included notes about her victims that revealed her disturbingly sociopathic mindset. Next to one restaurant owner's name, she had written, "Cried when I mentioned her children. Leverage emotional weakness." Next to a gym owner, she noted, "Husband has medical bills. Will settle to avoid bankruptcy." These weren't merely business transactions to Vanessa. She genuinely enjoyed the terrifying power she held over people's lives, the fear she could create with a single phone call or lawsuit filing, the satisfaction of watching successful business owners reduced to tears as they handed over checks, representing years of exhausting hard work. She had destroyed at least 4 businesses completely, forcing them to close permanently because they couldn't recover from the combined financial damage of her settlement demands and the reputational destruction caused by her accusations. She had driven 2 business owners into nervous breakdowns requiring hospitalization. She had contributed to the divorce of at least one couple whose marriage collapsed under the crushing stress of fighting her lawsuit. And through all of it, Vanessa felt nothing except pride in her own cleverness and excitement for her next victim. Her targeting of Sophia Kim and Serenity Wellness Spa followed her standard playbook with chilling precision. Vanessa researched the spa extensively before ever making contact. She knew Sophia was a first-generation immigrant from South Korea who had worked as a nail technician for 15 exhausting years before finally saving enough money to open her own business. She knew the spa had been open for less than 3 years and was still establishing itself financially. She knew Sophia had recently taken out a small business loan to purchase new equipment and was operating on dangerously thin margins. She knew Sophia's reputation in the community was built entirely on professionalism and inclusivity, meaning accusations of discrimination would be especially devastating to her brand. Vanessa identified Sophia as the perfect victim, someone who had everything to lose and limited resources to fight back. She called the spa and specifically asked about weight capacity for massage tables during the booking process, deliberately setting up a situation where she could later claim discrimination. When Sophia honestly explained that their professional-grade tables were rated for 350 pounds, which was the industry standard, Vanessa booked an appointment anyway, knowing she weighed 380 pounds and would likely be refused service for legitimate safety reasons. She arrived carrying a hidden camera in her purse that was already recording. Vanessa had rehearsed exactly what to say in order to create the most emotionally damaging footage possible. And when Sophia apologetically explained the safety concern and offered alternative services, including chair massage, facials, and aromatherapy treatments, Vanessa exploded into a carefully orchestrated performance of victimhood, so convincing it would have deserved an Academy Award nomination if it had been genuine instead of calculated fraud designed to extort money from an innocent woman whose only crime was being honest about safety limitations. The destruction Vanessa unleashed on Sophia Kim's life after that carefully staged encounter was swift, systematic, and horrifyingly devastating in ways that revealed just how experienced she had become at destroying people. Within 48 hours of the incident at Serenity Wellness Spa, Vanessa filed a $50 zeros-in lawsuit claiming weight discrimination, emotional distress, humiliation, and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The lawsuit was drafted by her attorney, Gregory Mills, a notorious ambulance chaser who had handled all 47 of her cases and made approximately $165,000 from his 40% cut of her settlements. Mills knew exactly how to write complaints designed to maximize fear and pressure, filling them with inflammatory language about systematic discrimination, willful violations of civil rights, and severe emotional trauma requiring ongoing therapy. Within 1 week, Vanessa's network of accomplices flooded every review platform with one-star reviews, claiming the spa discriminated against larger clients, was hostile toward disabled people, and employed rude staff who humiliated customers. The reviews were all posted within a 24-hour period from fake accounts created specifically for this attack, but they appeared legitimate enough to destroy Sophia's rating from 4.9 stars down to 2.3 stars almost overnight. Within 2 weeks, local news stations picked up the story after Vanessa contacted reporters with edited footage and a tearful performance, describing how she had simply wanted to enjoy a relaxing massage and instead was made to feel less than human because of her size. The segment aired with the headline, "Local Spa Accused of Weight Discrimination." It featured Vanessa sitting dramatically in her mobility scooter, describing how she had been humiliated and denied service because of her appearance. The broadcast showed a carefully edited clip of Sophia explaining the weight limitations, but removed all context about safety concerns and the alternative services she had offered. The damage to Sophia's reputation was immediate and catastrophic. Regular clients stopped booking appointments, afraid of being associated with a business accused of discrimination. New clients went elsewhere. Corporate wellness clients canceled contracts. Sophia's revenue dropped 60% within the first month, and she was bleeding money so quickly she could barely cover rent and payroll for her 3 employees. But the financial destruction was only part of Vanessa's attack. The psychological torture was equally devastating and revealed just how thoroughly Vanessa understood the pressure points capable of breaking people emotionally. Vanessa filed complaints with the State Attorney General's Office, the Department of Health, the Better Business Bureau, and every regulatory agency she could locate, triggering investigations that forced Sophia to spend endless hours responding to inquiries and producing documentation. She contacted Sophia's landlord, suggesting the spa's discriminatory practices created liability risks for the property owner, hoping to get Sophia evicted or at least create fear regarding her lease. Vanessa even contacted Sophia's suppliers and vendors, accusing them of supporting a discriminatory business and attempting to damage those relationships as well. Every action was designed to isolate Sophia, multiply the pressure, and create a sense of overwhelming panic that would make her desperate enough to settle simply to make the nightmare stop. Sophia spent $22,000 on attorney fees in the first 3 months alone, watching 15 years of savings disappear into legal bills for a case she knew she would eventually win if it actually reached trial. But that was Vanessa's entire strategy. Winning at trial didn't matter if the business was already destroyed by the time the verdict arrived. Part 3, Sophia Kim wasn't sleeping anymore. She had lost nearly 15 pounds from relentless stress and anxiety. Every morning before opening Serenity Wellness Spa, she suffered terrifying panic attacks that left her shaking so badly she could barely unlock the front door. Her hands trembled while performing treatments on the few loyal clients who still trusted her. Her parents, who had sacrificed everything to bring their family to America and give their daughter a better future, cried quietly when they saw what was happening to the dream Sophia had spent 15 years building. Her husband Daniel, who worked construction to support the business during its difficult early years, started taking extra shifts just to keep their household afloat while the spa hemorrhaged money. They were drowning financially and emotionally, and Vanessa Carter knew it because she had done this 31 times before and recognized every sign of a victim approaching the breaking point. That was when Vanessa delivered her settlement offer with the cold confidence of someone who had perfected psychological manipulation through years of practice. Through her attorney, Gregory Mills, she informed Sophia that although she firmly believed she had suffered terrible discrimination and deserved justice in court, she was willing to settle the matter for $50,000 and move on with her life. The number was chosen with disturbing precision, devastating enough to cripple Sophia financially, but still theoretically possible if she liquidated retirement savings, borrowed from family, or took out another loan. The offer included a strict 48-hour deadline and a threat that if Sophia refused, Vanessa would intensify the media campaign, file additional complaints, and pursue the case all the way to trial, where she would demand even more money. Most of Vanessa's previous victims had broken at this exact moment. The combination of mounting legal bills, collapsing reputations, lost customers, and emotional exhaustion became too overwhelming. But Sophia Kim was different. Instead of surrendering, she started investigating. She entered Vanessa Carter's name into legal databases and uncovered the horrifying pattern of 47 lawsuits stretching back 6 years. She contacted former victims and listened to their heartbreaking stories of intimidation, financial ruin, and forced settlements. Every story followed the exact same blueprint: impossible demands, hidden recordings, discrimination accusations, fake review attacks, regulatory complaints, and settlement offers designed to maximize fear. Sophia hired a private investigator who spent 2 weeks documenting Vanessa's real physical abilities. The investigator captured video of Vanessa walking through Target without assistance, pushing overloaded shopping carts, carrying heavy grocery bags, taking long walks with her dog, bending down repeatedly, and moving perfectly normally whenever lawsuits weren't involved. Sophia's attorney later obtained medical evaluations proving 3 independent doctors had concluded Vanessa had absolutely no physical impairments requiring mobility assistance. The scooter was fake. The disability claims were fake. The emotional trauma was fake. Everything about Vanessa's public image was a carefully manufactured performance designed to exploit sympathy and terrify small business owners into paying her. But Sophia's most important discovery came when she contacted a legal advocacy organization specializing in fraudulent litigation cases. The organization connected her with attorney Michael Reeves, a legal expert who had quietly tracked Vanessa's activities for over a year. Reeves already had files on 15 of her previous cases and believed she was running one of the largest coordinated discrimination fraud operations he had ever seen. He had simply never found a victim brave enough to fight back publicly. When Sophia refused to settle and agreed to expose Vanessa completely, Reeves realized they finally had an opportunity to stop her permanently. He contacted Judge Judy Files' production team through legal channels, providing documentation of Vanessa's lawsuit history and evidence suggesting organized fraud. Somehow, the case landed on Judge Judith Sterling's desk, and once the judge's research team began digging into Vanessa's background, they uncovered far more than anyone expected. By the time court day arrived, federal investigators were quietly monitoring the situation. IRS agents had begun reviewing Vanessa's finances, and FBI investigators were gathering evidence regarding interstate wire fraud and organized extortion. Vanessa Carter rolled into Judge Judith Sterling's courtroom on a Tuesday morning with the absolute confidence of someone who believed she had perfected the system. She spent 3 weeks preparing for the appearance, organizing fake legal documents inside an expensive leather portfolio, highlighting sections of disability law to sound knowledgeable, practicing emotional facial expressions in the mirror, and selecting clothing carefully designed to emphasize vulnerability while still appearing respectable to television audiences. She coordinated strategy sessions with Gregory Mills, believing this would simply become another televised settlement victory. What Vanessa could never have imagined was that Judge Judith Sterling had spent an entire week preparing not merely to rule against her, but to completely dismantle her criminal empire on national television. Part 4, Judge Judith Sterling's courtroom crackled with the tension so thick it felt almost impossible to breathe as the cameras began rolling and the audience settled into nervous silence. Vanessa Carter sat prominently in her mobility scooter near the defendant's table, already performing subtle gestures for the cameras that emphasized her supposed vulnerability and disability. Across from her, Sophia Kim looked exhausted beyond words, clutching a thick folder of evidence with trembling hands while praying someone would finally believe the truth after 8 unbearable months of emotional torture. Judge Judith Sterling reviewed her notes one final time, a faint smile forming at the corners of her mouth, the exact expression longtime viewers recognized whenever she was about to completely destroy someone foolish enough to underestimate her. She opened the proceedings with her trademark directness. Miss Carter, you are suing Miss Kim's Wellness Spa for $50,000, claiming you were discriminated against because of your weight and disability. Tell me exactly what happened. Vanessa immediately launched into the polished victim performance she had perfected over dozens of lawsuits. She spoke slowly and dramatically, claiming she had simply wanted to enjoy a massage therapy session before Sophia cruelly denied her service because of her appearance. She described herself as humiliated, emotionally traumatized, and discriminated against under federal disability laws. Her voice cracked at carefully rehearsed moments, and she maintained unwavering eye contact with Judge Judith Sterling as though she genuinely believed she controlled the courtroom. But the judge wasn't buying a single word. Leaning forward slightly, Judge Judith Sterling calmly asked whether Sophia had explained the massage table's safety limitations and offered alternative services. Vanessa dismissed the concern with an irritated wave of her hand, insisting weight restrictions were merely excuses for discrimination and claiming businesses were legally obligated to accommodate all body types regardless of safety realities. Judge Judith Sterling's eyebrows lifted slightly. So you believe safety equipment having weight ratings constitutes discrimination? Vanessa made her first serious mistake by attempting to lecture the judge about disability law. With all due respect, Your Honor, if you fully understood ADA requirements, you would recognize businesses must make reasonable accommodations instead of denying service. The courtroom shifted instantly. Judge Judith Sterling's expression hardened. She did provide alternatives: chair massage, facials, aromatherapy treatments. Did you accept any of them? Vanessa's composure flickered for the first time, Those weren't what I wanted. I specifically requested a traditional massage. Then came the question that changed everything. Miss Carter, how many lawsuits have you filed against small businesses in the last 6 years? The courtroom went dead silent. Vanessa hesitated, visibly stunned. I don't see how that's relevant to this specific matter. Judge Judith Sterling's voice turned cold. Answer the question. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her scooter before vaguely claiming she had defended her rights on several occasions. That was when Judge Judith Sterling opened the thick investigative file sitting on her bench and began dismantling Vanessa's entire operation piece by piece. Several occasions? Or 47 lawsuits? 47 separate legal actions against mostly immigrant-owned businesses following the exact same pattern. Impossible demands, hidden recordings, negative review attacks. Settlement demands between $8,000 and $15,000. Does that refresh your memory? Gasps spread throughout the courtroom as the scope of the scheme became horrifyingly clear. Vanessa's face shifted rapidly from confidence to panic. She tried objecting, claiming her previous lawsuits were irrelevant, but Judge Judith Sterling immediately shut her down. You don't get to object in my courtroom, Miss Carter. Your history establishes a pattern of systematic fraud. Vanessa's anger suddenly overpowered her usual calculated control. You're supposed to be impartial. Instead, you're attacking me before hearing all the evidence. Judge Judith Sterling slowly stood up from the bench, something she almost never did. Even the production crew looked startled. I'm attacking you. You came into my courtroom with a fraudulent lawsuit, fake disability claims, and 6 years of extorting hard-working people. And now you want to lecture me about fairness. That was when Vanessa Carter made the catastrophic mistake that destroyed her entire life. Furious and blinded by arrogance, she stood up from her mobility scooter without thinking, completely forgetting she was supposedly unable to walk without assistance. Pointing directly at Judge Judith Sterling with rage burning in her eyes, she spat out the words that would soon go viral across the world. Maybe you should calm your hormones, Judge. This is clearly menopausal overreaction. You're emotional, irrational, and too old to handle stress anymore. Maybe it's time for a younger, more stable judge. The silence afterward felt almost supernatural. The audience froze in disbelief. Sophia Kim's eyes widened in absolute shock. Even Gregory Mills buried his face in his hands, knowing his client had just committed public suicide on national television. Judge Judith Sterling's face transformed into something terrifyingly calm. Her voice dropped into a deadly whisper, somehow more frightening than shouting. What did you just say to me, Miss Carter? But Vanessa, too angry and proud to retreat, doubled down. I said you're hormonal and incapable of handling this case objectively. Judge Judith Stern stared at her for several seconds before speaking with icy precision. Miss Carter, you just made the single biggest mistake of your criminal career. Sit down and stay quiet while I explain to you and everyone watching exactly who you are. Then the destruction truly began. Judge Judith Sterling methodically exposed every part of Vanessa's fraud operation. The courtroom screen displayed a scrolling list of all 47 lawsuits, business names, settlement amounts, and timelines showing identical patterns of extortion. She revealed Vanessa's secret Facebook group, teaching others how to scam small businesses. She exposed the fraudulent webinars, the $299 scam guide, the fake witnesses paid per case, and the corrupt doctors selling fraudulent reports. Then came surveillance footage, showing Vanessa walking normally through stores, carrying heavy grocery bags, walking her dog, and moving perfectly fine whenever loss weren't involved. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Vanessa's entire carefully crafted identity collapsed in real time. Finally, Judge Judith Sterling delivered the fatal blow. You reported zero income while collecting $412,000 through extortion payments. That's tax evasion, Miss Carter. The IRS Criminal Division already has your records. The FBI is investigating your interstate fraud operation. Your attorney is under investigation. Your accomplices are cooperating with federal agents. Your criminal enterprise is finished. Vanessa completely broke down, mascara streaming down her face as she openly sobbed in front of millions of viewers. Judge Judith Sterling delivered her final ruling with absolute finality. Sophia Kim would receive reimbursement for all legal expenses, plus massive punitive damages. Vanessa's case was dismissed permanently. Then the judge leaned forward one last time. You wanted to lecture me about emotions? Let me tell you about real emotional trauma. The immigrant families you destroyed, the businesses you bankrupted, and the dreams you crushed for profit. You weaponized real discrimination to enrich yourself, and you disgrace every person who has ever faced genuine injustice. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel slammed down like a gunshot, ending Vanessa Carter's criminal empire forever. Part 5. Vanessa Carter stumbled out of Judge Judith Sterling's courtroom in complete emotional collapse, no longer pretending to need the mobility scooter that had been part of her deception for 6 years. The audience watched in stunned silence as the woman who had spent years terrifying innocent business owners suddenly looked like someone whose entire world had shattered in a single hour. Her carefully rehearsed confidence was gone. Her manipulative victim act was gone. All that remained was panic, humiliation, and the terrifying realization that the system she believed she had mastered was finally turning against her. Behind her, Sophia Kim broke down into tears of relief, so overwhelming she could barely stand. For 8 brutal months, she had lived inside a nightmare created by lies, intimidation, fake accusations, and relentless emotional torture. And now, for the first time since Vanessa entered her life, she could finally breathe again. The courtroom audience erupted into applause as Judge Judith Sterling quietly gathered her files, her expression calm but deeply satisfied. Everyone in that room understood they had witnessed something far bigger than an ordinary courtroom dispute. They had just watched a professional predator get exposed in front of the entire country. Within 1 hour of the episode airing online, clips of Vanessa's "Calm Your Hormones" comment and Judge Judith Sterling's devastating response exploded across social media platforms. Millions of people replayed the footage in disbelief as hashtags related to the case began trending worldwide. But what shocked viewers most wasn't the insult itself. It was the terrifying amount of evidence Judge Judith Sterling had already gathered before Vanessa even entered the courtroom. News outlets began investigating the story independently, uncovering more former victims who described identical patterns of intimidation, fake discrimination claims, online harassment, and settlement extortion. One by one, former business owners stepped forward publicly for the first time, finally realizing they had never been isolated victims at all. They had been targets in a calculated criminal operation. The federal investigations moved faster than anyone expected. IRS agents uncovered years of hidden income, fraudulent tax filings, and financial records proving Vanessa had intentionally concealed settlement money while falsely claiming it as tax-exempt compensation. FBI investigators traced interstate communications tied to threats, fraudulent legal filings, coordinated review attacks, and online coaching programs teaching others how to repeat the same scam. Search warrants executed on Vanessa's apartment revealed detailed spreadsheets of potential future victims, fake witness payment records, scripts for emotional courtroom performances, and thousands of messages from members inside her private fraud coaching group. Investigators even recovered webinar recordings where Vanessa openly bragged about breaking weak business owners emotionally before they could fight back. The evidence was overwhelming. Her attorney, Gregory Mills, attempted to distance himself from the operation almost immediately, but investigators discovered years of coordinated settlement agreements, misleading filings, and financial transactions connecting him directly to Vanessa's schemes. Several accomplices agreed to cooperate with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges, exposing how fake reviews were organized, how witnesses were coached, and how businesses were specifically selected based on vulnerability and fear. The two doctors who signed fraudulent disability reports lost their medical licenses pending criminal investigations. Vanessa's entire empire began collapsing faster than anyone could have imagined. 6 months later, Vanessa Carter stood inside a federal courtroom facing 28 criminal counts, including fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion, extortion, and wire fraud. Gone were the expensive outfits, the fake confidence, and the manipulative courtroom performances. This time, there were no cameras she could control, no frightened business owners to intimidate, and no settlement offers capable of making the consequences disappear. The federal judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison and ordered nearly $500,000 in restitution to victims whose lives she had damaged or destroyed. As the sentence was read aloud, several former victims quietly cried in the gallery, finally receiving a sense of justice they thought would never come. Meanwhile, Sophia Kim's life transformed in ways she never expected. After the episode aired, people across the country flooded Serenity Wellness Spa with support messages, positive reviews, and appointment requests. Her business revenue increased nearly 250% within months as customers intentionally chose to support the woman who refused to surrender to fraud and intimidation. Sophia later partnered with legal advocacy organizations, helping other immigrant-owned businesses protect themselves against predatory lawsuits and scams. She spoke publicly about fear, resilience, and the importance of fighting back even when the odds feel impossible. What Vanessa intended to destroy ultimately became stronger than ever. But perhaps the most unforgettable part of the entire story was the lesson millions of viewers took away from that courtroom. Real discrimination exists. Real victims exist. And people who weaponize serious social issues for personal profit don't just harm businesses. They damage the credibility of genuine victims who deserve to be heard and protected. Judge Judith Sterling understood that better than anyone, which is why her takedown of Vanessa Carter resonated so powerfully across the world. It wasn't simply about punishing arrogance. It was about exposing calculated manipulation, hiding behind false victimhood. Years later, clips from that courtroom confrontation still circulate online as one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. People continue replaying the exact second Vanessa smugly told the judge to calm your hormones, fully believing she still controlled the room, moments before her entire criminal empire collapsed forever. And every time viewers watch Judge Judith Sterling calmly dismantle 6 years of fraud with brutal precision, the reaction remains exactly the same: justice served perfectly.